As people do better, they start voting like Republicans, unless they have too much education and vote Democratic, which proves there can be too much of a good thing. Mr. Obama denounced the $2.3 trillion added to the national debt on Mr. Bush's watch as deficits as far as the eye can see. But Mr. Obama's budget adds $9.3 trillion to the debt over the next 10 years. What happened to Obama, the deficit hawk? The claim made by Team Obama that every dollar in stimulus translates into $1.50 in growth is economic fiction. The costs of stimulus reduce future growth. No country has ever spent itself to prosperity. The price of stimulus has to be paid sometime. Many Democrats have a pre-9/11 worldview. Empathy is the latest code word for liberal activism, for treating the Constitution as malleable clay to be kneaded and molded in whatever form justices want. It represents an expansive view of the judiciary in which courts create policy that couldn't pass the legislative branch or, if it did, would generate voter backlash. If you really want to diminish a candidate, depict him as the foil of his handler. This is as old in American politics as politics itself. But, look, Washington is a town that creates myths for its own existence and its own amusement, and I was a subject of myth, sort of like Grendel in Beowulf, you know, not seen very often but often talked about. Conservatives saw the savagery of 9/11 in the attacks and prepared for war. Liberals saw the savagery of the 9/11 attacks and wanted to prepare indictments and offer therapy and understanding for our attackers. Somebody gets to be smart and somebody gets to be dumb. If we win, it'll be because of the president. And if we lose, it'll be because of me. I'll never get out of politics. I have friends in public office. I have things that I want to do. You can't go back in life. I won't go back to the existence I had before of running a political consulting firm and signing up clients and advising campaigns in exactly that way. I would have strong opinions and be prepared to argue my case, but if you talk to my colleagues, I think you'd find they consider me the jokester, the informal mayor of the West Wing. Has there ever been a more revealing moment this year? Let me just put this in fairly simple terms. Al Jazeera now broadcasts the words of Senator Durbin to the Mideast, certainly putting our troops in greater danger. No more needs to be said about the motives of liberals. We've been probably to some degree too successful. You all had something to do with keeping me employed. If there's a leak out of my administration, I want to know who it is. Cindy Sheehan is a clown. There is no real anti-war movement. No serious politician, with anything to do with anything, would show his face at an anti-war rally. I think it's dawning on some Democrats that obstructing the Patriot Act, like they've been obstructing everything else, is bad for them politically. Alinsky's 1971 book, Rules for Radicals, is a favorite of the Obamas. Michelle Obama quoted it at the Democratic Convention. One Alinsky tactic is to pick the target, freeze it, personalize it, and polarize it. That's what the White House did in targeting Rush Limbaugh, Rick Santelli, and Jim Cramer. At the core, we are dealing with two parties that have fundamentally different views of the world. For a person who promised hope and civility in politics, Mr. Obama has shown a borderline obsessiveness in blaming Mr. Bush. In his first 100 days, Mr. Obama has put the fate of his presidency in the hands of House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid. He may come to regret that decision. Mr. Obama plans to boost federal spending 25% while nearly tripling the national debt over 10 years. Americans know that this kind of spending will have economic consequences, including new taxes being imposed by the new progressives. The difficulty for Mr. Obama will be when the public sees where his decisions lead: higher inflation, higher interest rates, higher taxes, sluggish growth, and a jobless recovery. Mr. Obama has an ingenious approach to job losses. He describes them as job gains. What Mr. Obama wants in a nominee isn't really empathy and understanding. He wants a liberal, activist Supreme Court justice. I wish I had the billions of dollars that George Soros has that he has used to fund democratic causes in the past. You may be right that people say, you know what, we had Obama. He was inexperienced. The guy had great rhetoric, sounded good, looked good, but has turned out to be an utter disaster. I want someone where I have confidence and credibility that they're up to the job and that I can trust what they tell me. Remember, the Tea Party movement didn't get started in September of 2008 when the bank bailout was passed. It really began on February 19, 2009 when a television commentator named Rick Santelli stood up and said, "What the hell are we doing bailing out people who couldn't afford a mortgage by taking money from people like me who are prudent?" Memo to White House: calling voters stupid is not a winning strategy. My parents, particularly my father, had been used by commentators, political journalists and political commentators, to attack me, and the collateral damage was the reputations of my father and my mother. You need to look at Congress as having a certain capacity. Now, the capacity varies from year to year and from body to body, but there is a finite amount of things that Congress can attentively do. I have become an adjective. There is something called a Rovian style of campaigning, and it's meant as an insult. One columnist said it consists mainly of throwing mud until it sticks. One prominent blogger described the elements of a textbook Rovian race as fear-based, smear-based, and anything goes. Life is rough for a lot of people. Some people live in greater material circumstances than others, but life is rough for everybody. It's not comfortable for me to write about my family. I'm not comfortable writing about me. The Tea Party movement is a wide and diverse group. It will hurt the Republican Party if some elements of the Tea Party decide to become third-party advocates because it will split the conservative vote. I believe in traditional marriage. I left the White House in 2007. You know, I knew when I went there that it would be for a limited period of time. I was grateful that the average tenure of a White House senior aide is 18 to 20 months. I was there for nearly 7 years. Well, I'm a Christian. I was born a Presbyterian and became an Episcopalian. I think if you talk to my colleagues, I was less than a fearsome individual. Well, marriage is a very important part of our culture and our society. If we want to have a hopeful and decent society, we ought to aim for the ideal. Our competition for American business is no longer in the next county or the next state, it's around the world. I mean, if you have to wake up in the morning to be validated by the editorial page of the New York Times, you got a pretty sorry existence. Look, there ought to be politics in politics. Well, I don't want to become a prognosticator. The fallback position in politics is if you don't know what you want to be about, and if you don't know what your vision is, go at somebody else. I know enough about European politics to know you've got a lot of crazy people who make their way onto the ballot. In Europe and the United States, you've got different systems to select candidates, and no system is perfect. Ronald Reagan wasn't in the establishment of the Republican Party either, nor was Richard Nixon. If you look underneath the surface of the Tea Party movement, on the other hand, you will find that it is not sophisticated. It's not like these people have read the economist Friedrich August von Hayek. I've been booed on stages. I'm a little bit tougher than to walk off a stage because someone says something ugly. Visit our website for more quotes, quoting.com.